We've been listening to the words that Jesus spoke from the hillside, that's better known as the Sermon on the Mount. And hopefully doing more than listening, but actually learning how we can apply those things to our lives and actually live them out. So far that Jesus has talked about anger and lust and affairs and divorce, and pretty much sounds like a normal night on television for the most part. But this morning, he speaks to us about the importance of telling the truth. And so in Matthew chapter 5, this begins in verse 33. Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you've made. But I tell you, don't swear an oath at all, either by heaven or by God's, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. That's changed a little bit now. You can do that. All you need to say is simply yes or no. And anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So, Jesus brings up those people of long ago again. Where I grew up, we used to say, like the old folks say, and then he restates the truth that he's talking about how important it is to speak the truth. There's a parallel saying to this in James chapter 5. We have this verse. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or anything else. Let your yes be yes, your no be no, or you will be condemned. So swearing an oath was apparently a fairly normal thing in New Testament times. If you wanted someone to believe what you said, then you swore an oath, and that meant you were telling the truth. Now, the bad side of that is, if you had to swear an oath to state you were telling the truth, it means that a whole lot of people were lying. You wouldn't have to make an oath if everybody just told the truth, but that's apparently not how it was. And so this particular teaching of Jesus, it goes back to two of the commandments. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor, and you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. And so this applies on all kinds of levels, but the most basic is Jesus is saying simply, just tell the truth. There were two kinds of oaths that people took in those days. One was called an assertive oath. That means that what I am telling you that either I did or didn't do is true. Like the jelly stain was on the couch when I sat down. I swear. That's an oath that something you did or didn't do is true. The other one is called a promissory oath, and it has a future kind of tense to it. It's making a promise about what I will do or will not do in the future. Like I swear I will not slide into second base while holding a beverage. Not again. That's a future assertive oath or a promissory oath. So this cultural emphasis on oaths, it seems, a little strange to us, but apparently it was something they often did. But it didn't go away. It still exists today. People still do this. Sometimes someone tells you something, and you give them that look like, yeah, I'm not sure I believe that. And then they'll say, I swear it's true. I swear. I swear on a stack of Bibles. That's one you used to hear a lot. I'm not sure why. You can lie just as easy with your hand on a stack of Bibles as you can with them in your pockets. But swearing on something holy seems to lend more credibility to what you're saying. So that's why you swear on a whole stack of Bibles, not just one, or a stack of Pulp Fiction. And so what he's saying is that if you're going to make an oath, especially if you're going to use God's name, if you're going to swear by God's name, or if you're going to swear an oath to God, you better make sure you're telling the truth and that you're serious about it. And then this led to the practice of swearing by things that sounded holy but were not. So it was kind of like crossing your fingers. So instead of swearing by God that I'm telling you the truth, I'll swear by heaven. That sounds pretty holy, but it's not really God, so don't have to really tell the whole truth. Or I can swear by the earth, or swear by, Jerusalem, swear by your own head. Whatever you swear by, and the oath sounds serious, but so somebody swears, by God to you, then you can take what they're saying as the truth. If they swear by, heaven or the temple or something else, you may want to check some things out. If they swear to you on their lame camel, then, you better read the fine print. That's probably not very truthful. So in other words, you only had to tell the truth when you were under oath. Any other time, you could lie all you wanted and still be considered a righteous person. And that sounds pretty ridiculous. And Jesus thought so. He actually addresses this again in Matthew chapter 23. Jesus said this, "Woe to you, blind guides! You say if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if he swears by the gold of the temple, then he's bound by his oath. You blind fools! Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift, then he is bound by his oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and the one who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and the one who sits on it." And so Jesus basically said, this is ridiculous. You have all your little fine points and all your little loopholes and your fingers crossed. Jesus said, just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. All this oath stuff is just ridiculous. And so throughout this sermon, Jesus is talking to them about how they've interpreted the Old Testament laws legalistically, and in doing so have just missed the point. They really thought, if they never killed anyone, and they never had an affair, and they've divorced their wives properly, and they never lied under oath, then they were really good, righteous people. And Jesus says, the bar's a little higher than that. God expects more out of us as his followers. God expects us to control our anger so that it doesn't destroy our relationships, to get a grip on our lust so that it doesn't destroy our relationships, to honor the people that we make commitments with, and to tell the truth, not just when we're under oath, but all the time. Jesus is saying, that honesty is just a part of what God desires for our character. And when we practice honesty, then it helps our relationships to grow stronger and more solid. Because, not being honest or not telling the truth, sometimes it's tempting to be a short-term solution to a problem, but it never works in the long run. And even if you're never caught in a lie, it does something to your character. It chisels away at who God created you to be. And so dishonesty not only destroys our relationships, it destroys us. And we've learned to even be dishonest about being dishonest. Instead of owning up and saying, I just lied, that was not true. We say, well, it's a little white lie. No. I just stretched the truth a little bit. And here's some new ones I learned. That was a strategic misrepresentation. It was a reality augmentation. A terminological inexactitude. Alternate facts. Spin. We can call it whatever we like, but it's just plain lying. So why is Jesus so interested in telling the truth? It's always because he knows that dishonesty ruins our relationships. You can't have a relationship with someone where there's no trust. And remember, Everything always comes back to relationships. Things that are sin are not a sin because God wrote a law somewhere and it got broken. Things that are a sin because they break relationships. That's always the case. And when we're not honest, we can't have relationships with each other the way we should. I mean, just think about it for a moment. I mean, what would it be like in your marriage if there were no trust, no honesty? What would it be like between you and your best friend if you couldn't trust them, if there was no honesty in that relationship? You can't have a relationship without those things. And even the people you work with, if you can't believe what they say and you can't, it damages the whole relationship that you have working together. And sometimes, business people are encouraged to be dishonest, to misrepresent products or services, and there's some people who buy into that and think, yeah, that's the fast track to the top. But if you just stop for a moment and think about it, I mean, who do you want to do business with? Do you want to do business with someone who tells you the truth and is honest, or someone you can't trust? Yeah, we all do. We all want to do business with people we trust. And trust makes a huge difference. Unfortunately, honesty and truthfulness are even lacking in church because sometimes we're afraid to speak the truth. And it takes truth to form the kind of community where people care about each other and love each other no matter what. The Bible says we're to speak the truth in love. Love and truth, they're both important. And I know I've used this analogy before, but I think it's an accurate one. As I think that truth and love are kind of like the surgeon and the anesthesiologist. You need both. You need a surgeon who can cut in and get rid of what's wrong that needs to be removed. And you need the anesthesiologist to help you to be able to bear it. The truth without love is like surgery without the anesthesiologist. It can be painful and it can be unnecessarily cruel. But love without the truth is like the anesthesiologist without the surgeon. You feel really good for a while, but you don't get any better. It takes both. It takes speaking the truth in love. And it's essential for our relationship with God. Once Jesus was talking with a Samaritan woman, this is in John chapter 4, at a well. And there was this theological debate between Samaritans and Jewish folks about where should you worship God. The Samaritans believed you worship God up on this mountain. The Jewish people believed you worship God at the temple in Jerusalem. And so she was talking with Jesus and she asked him, what is your answer? Where's the most holy place to worship God? And I love how Jesus never gets caught up in other people's agenda. He went straight to the truth about what she was asking. And this is what he said. He said, yet a time is coming and has now come when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. Because see, our relationship with God demands honesty. We come to God as who we are, and we're honest before God. I mean, I can't think of anything sillier than lying to God anyway, because God knows. But we come to God, we don't try to pretend to be somebody we're not. We don't come up with, all these things to prop up our failures. We just come to God and say, this is who I am. And God loves us and accepts us. Max Lucado put it this way. He said, grace means it's finally safe to turn ourselves in. We can stop pretending and say, God, I'm not honest with anybody else, but this is who I am. And when you do that, God accepts you and loves you. Man, what a God we serve, who accepts us and loves us as we are. And the traditional understanding was that if a person told the truth under oath, that person was righteous. And if you lied in your regular conversations, that was fine because you hadn't promised that it was true. As long as you didn't promise what you said was true, it doesn't have to be. And you can only imagine what kind of culture that leads to. It leads to a culture where you don't have to be honest unless you're under oath, you know. It's that way in our culture, you know, when you testify in court, you take an oath, and if you aren't honest, it's called perjury, and you're in trouble. So there was a culture where unless you were under oath, you didn't have to tell the truth. And unfortunately, we understand that. Because between politics and consumerism, it's hard to believe anything anymore. Most of the political ads I've seen so far this year are full of inaccuracies, or you could just say lies. And a number of commercials that are hawking products are not telling the truth about what their product does. You could just say lies. And then social media is full of those news articles that are completely false. They're just lies. And we've become so used to it that we just accept that this is the way things are. And this is exactly what Jesus warned us about. Because he said the vicious cycle is you tell one lie to cover the last lie, and then it leads to another lie, and pretty soon it's just a vicious cycle of lie after lie, and nobody knows the truth, and nobody knows what to believe anymore. And it undermines trust, and it destroys our relationships. But then Jesus showed us a way out. He said the only way things are going to change is if followers of Jesus take his word seriously. And then he gave us this transforming initiative. He said, in that vicious cycle of lie after lie after lie, Jesus said, you tell the truth. Let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. That's how you redeem it. Is that we tell the truth. And as followers of Jesus, that is our calling. We need to be the ones who stop accepting lies and catering to lies and seeking the truth. And willing to accept the truth even if it isn't what we want to hear or it doesn't, comply with what we want to believe. We accept the truth. We hear the truth. We don't spread things that aren't the truth. We listen, we hear the truth, we believe the truth, and we speak the truth. That is the transforming initiative that gets us out of this vicious cycle. And if that isn't enough good reason, I have one more. Mark Twain reminded us, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember so much.